Yes, who am I passing it on to?
Evan Waters, please.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock on my watch on Thursday, September 15th. And I'm calling the Lunenburg Finance Committee meeting to order. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link attached in the agenda posted on the town website. Or from a telephone, dial the toll-free number also listed on that agenda and enter the web ID number. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. With that, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll just make a note that our member Jay Simeone is joining us via Zoom, so any votes taken will be a roll call vote this evening. Are there any announcements from the committee? Hearing none. Any announcements from the public? I don't see any. All right. I don't have anything to pass on for the chair's report tonight other than it is possible that we are going to see if we're able to set up a meeting for around 6 p.m. on Tuesday before the joint meeting with the select board, just to see if we want to brainstorm anything else ahead of time. So I'm just throwing that out there for thought during the meeting, and then we can make a decision later on if need be.
Do you have time to post that?
It's been sent.
Okay.
As just on my phone call with Peter, we realized that, oh shoot, town hall's not open on Fridays. So I did send a very fast agenda over at about 5:45 just to Ellen and to Catherine. So with any luck, they'll get it. If not, we will have to just kind of go forward with what we have tonight, which is still, I think, sufficient. We have everything. It's just now that we have the actual article in front of us, Article 3 from the Select Board, I would like to at least have a chance to digest it a little bit more. For Town Manager and Finance Director reports, I have an update from the Town Manager, and I'll give our Finance Director a little bit of time to get situated. She's here now. So from the Town Manager, the DPW Director has ordered the 6-wheel truck from the FY22 capital plan item, the 10-wheel truck from the FY23 capital plan, and the utility truck / rotary mower combo from the FY23 plan. The expected delivery date for both trucks is 12 months out, and the tractor mower is 9 months out. All three purchases combined are $1,140 over the capital appropriations and will need to come out of the current year's operating budget. Next, one of the new police cruisers is now on the road, and the other will be on the road in the next few weeks from the FY22 capital plan. The chief will be ordering the hybrid cruiser and responder truck later on this week. The Council on Aging Director received notification that the amount the town will receive in formula grant funds has been finalized by the state. The population figures will be based on the UMass Donahue Institute populations, since the federal census numbers will not be available until spring. This population statistic has Lunenburg at 3,155 persons over age 60, and based on the $12 per elder, and the town will receive $37,860 in formula grant funds, an increase of $12,588 over FY22. That's good news. The facility director, the council on aging director, and the engineer had a site visit for the ADA patio this week. The original estimate that was in the FY23 capital plan of $100,000 appears that it will not be sufficient, but at this time, an updated estimate is not known. Lastly, the public safety building chiller project is expected to begin in 2 weeks. That's on the FY22 capital project. Monty Tech has begun the Ritter Break Room project from the FY21 capital project. And the Woodruff property cleanup will go out to bid on September 19th from the FY23 capital project. The facilities director is already working on a number of other projects that will be going out to bid, including the town hall repairs, both from the FY22 and FY23 capital plans, and the senior center roof, HVAC, and generator from the FY23 capital plan. That is the update from the town manager. Any questions that I probably can't answer? Madam Finance Director, any updates for you? Okay. Are you aware of why we are receiving so much more this year for the seniors? Is it simply because the number has
It's the
gone up?
population figure.
It's gone up that drastically?
And Sue Doherty, the senior center director, was waiting for that, and she did expect that with the new updated census figures, we would receive more money. And I know that those haven't totally been finalized, but the state is using the Donahue figures, so that was a good thing for the senior center.
Very good thing.
What age is that
I
associated?
believe it's
60 plus.
60 plus? Okay.
Has Sue Donahue mentioned anything about an increase in traffic over at the Eagle House at all?
Not to me, I don't
No.
know about Heather.
Okay. She hasn't said anything about budget increases or anything?
No.
At least at this point?
No.
Okay. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk to her about that as well. All right, so there's just 2 topics for tonight, just to kind of get us ready for the joint meeting with the Select Board on Tuesday, the 20th. The first one is the debt capacity, and that is a question that we sort of they want to have a discussion with the Finance Committee on our opinions on debt capacity spending and just kind of get our take for things coming up. Peter's historically kind of driven this discussion in terms of expendable debt getting right up against and sometimes and potentially up and over our 11% our levy limit, or excuse me, our 11% limit. And the discussions that we've had since have sort of been around reversing the way that we're looking at this, instead of coming at it from here's what we want, here's how much it's going to cost. Should we look at it instead and say, here's what we have that we can put ourselves, if we want to limit ourselves at 10% of that, or 10.5%, or even up to 11%. Here is our available spending that we can put on the excludable debt for that year, and then carry that out across to see, okay, here's our purse that we have to spend out of. What do we want to allocate those funds to?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, that still, to me, feels like the best way to do it is look out, see what the budget is for all these projects, time phased as they are, and then, fit the project to the budget that's, or no more than the budget that's available. And I do see that, Tom, for the building design committee, it seems that you're really attacking the needs, the absolute needs versus, the wants and the, maybe even sometimes like the dreams or something. So I think that is the right approach to doing it. I guess the only other thing that, if there are some of these 1 month kind of spikes or 1 year kind of spikes over the capacity, is there something that could be done, via putting money into, certain budgets for that year or something like that? I mean, probably not even anything like that, right? Like a capital reserve fund for this and kind of utilize it in that year. And
I guess I'm not sure what you mean.
I mean, if we have a policy that says 11%,
Yeah.
and there's 1 year where, because of the timing, it pops up to 12%, and we don't want to change the policy, but we want to remain within the policy. And I think you've also said in the past that that drives positive bond ratings and, you know, fiscal controls like that.
Well, having that policy and being compliant with the
Yeah.
policy are huge to bond rating agencies.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I guess I'm still confused, because if you exceeded the policy, like if our excludable debt policy says that it's not gonna be any more than 11% of the tax levy, and in a year it goes up to 12, then, well, number one, you're in violation of the policy, but then I'm not sure what you mean about,
yeah, just if you had extra money that year to pay down debt at the same time, you know.
oh,
to-
are you talking about draws on our stabilization
Yeah.
funds in order to pay down debt?
Yeah, just to
Well-
make it a little bit more level.
But the only thing would be, depending on the debt that's outstanding, whether or not it's callable, because there's only certain times that you're allowed to do
Yeah.
that. So, I mean, we would have to look at those to see whether or not we had the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Are we able to plan ahead and say, okay, we would have this purchase work we'd like to do, and in FY '29, we look at where we're projected to be, and it's gonna be 11.05%, but if we plan ahead, can we appropriate money to be spent to knock that half or that?
Well, we could have, the funding source for the project itself, in order to keep us below that level, you know, we could do raise and appropriate, we could do free cash, we could do whatever to make sure that we're still within the policy.
Would that take place when the purchase is made, or would that have to take place in the fiscal year that you're gonna be over the limit?
It would have to, you would have to vote it in the fiscal year that you authorize the project as part of the funding source for that project in order to maintain the level that we
Okay.
have per our policy.
So we do have the ability to sort of go over it so long as we allocate the funds to keep ourselves below the actual limit.
Right.
Okay.
And, well, I mean, of course, it would be dependent on the town manager and everybody
Yeah,
being
yeah.
agreeable to those funding sources, but, what was I gonna say? Oh, we actually have a short-term ban that's coming due in October, so I will be speaking with David Eisenthal probably within, sometime next week. So when I do have the conversation with him, I will also talk to him about what you're looking for as far as the debt capacity, and rather than looking at the numbers for a project, seeing what we can borrow going out. I mean, that is what I provided you in order to keep us in the policy, but, you know, you have to take into consideration principal and interest payments in those years, so.
I started doing a little bit of that, and then I realized exactly that it's great, I have these numbers, then it goes up quite quickly in the next few fiscal years, but that doesn't take into account anything in terms of borrowing, what the
Right.
percentages you're gonna
So-
be at, or interest rates or anything.
I don't know, I'll, like I said, I will talk to him, but I think it'll be, I guess I don't know how he's going to be able to approach it without knowing what the costs of the different projects are.
Is there a general,
And what they are, because that's gonna be you know, you can look at what our capacity is in each one of those years, but depending on the project would determine the length of the borrowing. You know, there's a bunch of different variables that you have to look at depending on whatever it is that the project is. And I mean, most of the projects that we would be looking at would be probably 20 and possibly even 30-year bonds. So there's a lot to it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I think the other option is you could delay a project for a year or so if you have 5 projects that you all want, and that's kind of what we're, get all these individual projects. Well, there's certain projects you gotta do one, then the other, but there's other projects that could be put off for a little while. And but the thing would be is to be able to have enough information to play with the numbers so somebody can go in and go, okay, looks like, if we wait till fiscal year 2025, we'll be all right if we do this project.
Right,
But
and
it's-
typically, anyway, if it's a large project, you're gonna phase out the borrowing. You're not gonna, if you have a $20 million project, you're not gonna borrow $20 million up front. You're gonna borrow it as it's needed and
Right.
phase it out over the years, so,
That makes it even more complex.
yeah. Like what we did with the school, I mean, we didn't, well, although that was partially funded by the state, but we didn't go out and borrow the town's share all up front. We did it as we needed it. So we have about, I think, 4 or 5 bond issues for that project that were phased out over a number of years.
Do you do it each year? You figure out what you're gonna need and, or?
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to do like a cash flow to determine how the project's gonna move along and when you're gonna need sums of money.
Right.
What are the rates that will anticipate, if we were to borrow today, what are the rates
You know,
going
I
up a lot?
honestly don't know, but I know on our short-term borrowing, it's less than 1% that we're paying right now.
Even with all
Long-term,
the,
I wouldn't think that long-term now would be any higher than like 4, if that, right now. But then again, you have to factor, you know, you have to project out what you think is gonna happen over those number of years with interest rates as well. And determine when the best time is for you to do that borrowing to receive the best interest. So, there's a lot to it.
Karen, a couple questions for me. So the number that we're trying to, the key number is the 11% of excludable debt, is that right?
Correct.
Is that the key number that we
Well,
solve?
it's actually a combination of the two, because I think the excludable debt is 11, the regular debt is 4, but the
Yeah.
combination of the two is 14.
Okay, so there's both the 4 and the 11.
But the aggregate of the two shouldn't be any more than a total of 14.
Because I'm looking at the debt service schedule you sent. In 2021, that 11%, we're at 9.8. It goes down. 2024, we're at 7.8%. So we're quite a bit lower than that, right? I think maybe an easy way to, and I think this is kind of what we're saying about solving for what's the capacity to borrow. You know, if there's a way to assume certain amount of projects that kind of, if you get that 11% going straight across the,
Right.
for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, I mean, that's the max you could borrow, right?
Right.
And so that, even just having a number like that is helpful as a bracket for what we should be thinking about. So when you talk to this gentleman, I think it'd be interesting to see if they can model something like that.
And, I mean, I'm sure that there's something that we can do, but
Yeah.
I guess we need to determine what the best way is to approach it.
Yeah.
And David Eisenthal will be very helpful with that.
And do we always borrow at a fixed rate?
No, it's not always a fixed rate. When we go out to bid for a project, the rate, I mean, the rates don't fluctuate a lot from year to year, but they're not necessarily always fixed rates. We can do level financing so that principal and interest payments are equal throughout the term of that bond. You could do that rather than have your interest go down each year because you're paying off more principal. You can do level debt service so that your principal and interest payments are equal throughout the life of the bond.
But we don't have any debt that's, the interest rate is floating, do we? Or do we? So that it moves like with LIBOR or with some other metric?
Well, we definitely have bonds that are issued right now where interest rates that we're paying fluctuate throughout the life of the bond. I
They
mean,
do.
it's
So
not
not the-
It's not a huge fluctuation, but there's definitely a fluctuation.
So they're pegged to some index?
I would say yes, but again, I'm not involved on that
Okay.
side for the people that are actually placing the bid. But
Okay.
but they fluctuate throughout the life, but can they change once we purchase the bond?
I mean, are you,
no, when
So they're
when
not variable rates in there?
there's variable rates like, once we determine who the best person, who the best company is to buy that bond from us, when they structure the repayments back, there's a fluctuation in interest rates maybe from year to year.
But once the bond is issued, you know what the interest rates are.
Absolutely.
It doesn't move up and down. I
No.
think that's a different way to
No,
ask it.
no, that does not happen. It's
Okay.
fixed. Once we
Right.
award the bid, then we know what the interest is going to be. We know what our principal and interest payments are going to be. They're fixed.
Right. Got
for
it.
the term of the bond. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Just for an exercise, would it be worthwhile to use the 4 different phases or 5 different phases that we used for the building of the school? Just for sort of to outline an example of where we
Well,
could
and
move
he
further
would
forward?
definitely do that.
Okay.
I mean, because, like I said, if we had a $20 million project, we're not going to go out and bond $20 million
Right.
up front. So we would do it on an as-needed basis, and you would just have to put together a cash flow of what it is you need to fund that project at certain times, and that's what would determine how many borrowings we do for that particular project.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I think it would be certainly a laborious project to go through, but I think if you added it in there and said, okay, we're going to select 20 years for the repayment or 25 for the average or something like that, select your amount that fits for the first one, for the first year, carry that across, and then you can see what your step up is for the next year when you step something else off.
Yep.
And you can see, okay, we could theoretically do a phase 2 in this year, we could do a phase 3 in this year.
Yeah.
We could stick another project in this year and have that one start carrying forward and just, I think you could at least build out an idea of what you could spend at that point.
Well, and as Tom was saying, when he was looking at the debt schedule, it drops off in 2024.
Right.
Well, that is, in 2023, the primary school will be paid for. So you see the
Okay.
drop off
There's a
in
big drop, yeah.
2024. Yeah.
And then it continues to, trend down.
Could I ask a very elementary question that I tried to find online, but I couldn't get an actual answer that worked for me? The difference between net regular debt and excludable debt, the 4% versus the 11%, what would fall into those two? What makes them different?
Well, typically for a larger project like I guess it depends. It depends on the town too, because obviously with an excludable debt project, you need the vote of the voters in order to make that happen, so that you can levy above and beyond your 2.5%. So, as an example, for our DPW facility, we did that within regular borrowing. We didn't go out and ask for an excludable debt on that project. So, it's the will of the people, I guess I would say, and the will of the town as to whether or not they want it in or out of that calculation.
Okay.
But, if you're going to build a $70 million school, obviously that's going to be an excludable debt project, because there's no way to fund that within your operating budget.
That explains why I couldn't find a suitable answer online. It was all over the place.
Yeah, that's a great question for clarification, because I think that was my assumption, but I just want to make sure I fully understand it. So anything over the 2.5%, like that's going to have to be an additional, is it an additional tax?
Well, what happens is, any of our projects that are excludable debt, the levy is increased for the life of that bond.
That bond,
And
yeah.
it doesn't go towards the calculation of what we can raise per Prop 2.5. So it's not part of our regular tax levy, it's above and beyond.
So it's kind of a separate,
your taxes increase
yeah,
for the life of that project,
separate-
of that bond.
a separate incremental tax, property tax, right?
Right.
That funds the bond principal and interest.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. And the other one, the regular debt is obviously within our allowable limit under the 2.5.
Okay,
So that comes right out of what our normal operating budget would be.
okay.
And that's where you require the town vote, isn't it? 2.5 override, that's.
Yeah,
basically-
you
so
have
it's-
to have, it has to pass at both town meeting and a town election.
But it's not a 2.5 override.
It's not, well, I mean,
It's like a 2.5.
it's not, but it is.
It's
You
kind of,
gotta-
yeah, right.
You have to have a vote.
You have to have a vote, yep.
An override becomes part of your base. Once you vote an override, it becomes
It's
part of your
fixed.
allowable
It's forever.
base.
Then it's 2.5 of next year of the new
It gets
base.
included in there,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Isn't the excludable debt for a certain term?
Dependent upon the project. So as an example, we voted the pavement management,
Right.
and we determined, well, before the vote, that we were gonna structure that debt for 15 years. The the middle school, high school project, those are 30-year bonds. So the term of the bond is, well, I mean, it's driven by statute too, as to how long you can go for each one of those projects, but typically, you would expect that a school building would last a lot longer than putting pavement down on the road. So you would bond for the school project for 30 years, bond for the pavement management for 15.
And just, again, I'm just reading from my spreadsheet here, which is very helpful. Net excludable debt for fiscal year 2022, the amount is about 2.8 million. So that's that 2.8 million of an additional tax used to pay that debt for service,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Absolutely.
And that
Yep.
declines over time, but, okay, got it. As the projects roll off, it declines and,
It'll drop off, yeah. And the levy, it will no longer be part of the levy.
got it.
Any other questions? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
It's a good thing you were here, though. This is fantastic.
it's okay. That's why I'm here.
So I think we're relatively in consensus, at least for our conversation with the select board in terms of an approach, sort of a different approach from how we've been doing this, just for our recommendation at least. Safe to say. Good enough.
Yeah, so we got an email, oh, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, what exactly do you mean by that, Edmund?
Well, so they want to have a discussion on, or they're open to having a discussion with us on the excludable debt capacity spending. And I think it was meant to just be a general discussion, and I think they understand that our purpose, or I don't know what they're actually thinking that we're going to talk to them about specifically with it, but my intention was to express the need to look at this in a different way. That we don't want to that we shouldn't be looking at as, oh, we want to have this project completed, let's go get a bid on it, or a quote on it, and oh, it comes in at $50 million, now what do? We can't afford it. Rather than when all of that time has been put in by the Municipal Design Committee, by the TC Passios Committee, all those different groups that have been put together that have done wonderful work to come up with these ideas and these plans, and then it comes to town floor and the town says, no, that's way too expensive, we can't afford that. Or we look at year 4 on this plan and we say, oh, we're gonna be at 14% just on the excludable debt. So what I mean by this is just as a committee going to the select board, that we're in general consensus to suggest that maybe we need to stop the idea of just, here's what we want, now let's find out how much it costs, and then get told we can't afford it. Rather go about it and say, okay, here's what we can afford, now go and create the projects that are going to see, okay, what can we get for that amount of money? That was all I meant by general consensus.
Yeah, so my view is I don't think the financial policy should change. I don't think the debt numbers in the policy should change at this point either. And
You don't either.
I agree.
And I think the approach that you laid out is the proper approach. And I'm the Municipal Design Committee, which is obviously like the largest of these forthcoming debts, I think is taking a good approach. It's a holistic approach, looking at all the possibilities, laying them out, time phasing them as necessary. And then, you know, once you determine one of your approaches, whether it's A, B, or C, or some combination of the three of them, I think assigning budgets to those so that we stay within the debt capacity over the next 30 years or whatever is the approach to take to meet the policies.
And so I got an email from Elaine with the text of Article 3 of the,
Yeah.
and I, you know, I just got it this afternoon, but it has had some of the details of those policies, and so I think what you're saying, Chris, is, you know, I mean, I guess I don't understand what is our flexibility to change that policy? Are there any of these things that are state mandated? This is just the town policy that we've had for a while, which seemingly has worked pretty well.
Yeah, I think the only thing though is, did our bond could go down if we reduced those numbers, right? Is that what you had said in the past?
Our bond, if we increase those.
Increase.
If you increase the borrowing capacities, our bond rating would become better?
No, I think it would go down.
Right, that's my,
Yeah,
that's what
go
it is.
down.
So when I mean, someone said 11 and 14, so my assumption was always that was something that bond agencies used as a rule of thumb. That's what they like to see, or is that?
Well, no, and actually, when we get a bond rating, one of the things that doesn't give us the best rating that we could have is the fact that we do have so much debt outstanding. And bond rating agencies don't care whether it's regular debt within your operating budget or excludable debt. They're just looking at your total debt. And like that policy is a town policy, and I can tell you only because I've been here for 30 million years, that policy, when it was kind of written around the middle school, high school project, because that was driving up those percentages at that point in time. So I think part of what was done at the time that the policy was written, because we had the debt, or at least some of the debt, in place for the middle school, high school project, I think the thought process at that time was that we probably wouldn't exceed those percentages that were in place at that time with the policy. So that was like almost like a worst case scenario. I mean, there were a lot of other factors that were taken into place when the policy was written too, but we did have that debt, or at least a portion of that debt, that drove those percentages up. And, you know, you see those percentages start to go up, and you didn't want them to go up any more than what those percentages are right now per the policy.
And it's a select board policy. They're the
Yes.
ones that.
Yeah, well, I
vote on
mean,
it.
it was, the finance
Finance
committee was
committee.
very involved, and
Very
I think
involved, yep.
maybe even the, I don't know if the capital planning committee was involved at that time, but definitely the finance committee.
Do you
The
know,
policy has been in place for a while, and then they revisited it and did some revisions on it.
Yeah, but I think that the revisions that were made were a result of that project. I mean, don't quote
I
me on
believe
that.
so. Yeah, that would make sense.
I think the article that was sent
Yep.
to us, Article 3, states when things were changed.
It does.
I haven't seen that.
Would you like to see it?
I haven't either.
Yeah, 2018, 2017, 2014, 2021.
Yeah, and, you know, I
All
think
over the place.
2014, or right around 2014, 2015 was probably around the time that we were dealing with the middle school, high school project.
So I watched the select board meeting when they first discussed it. I may have missed maybe some updates, but I think that they were inclined not to change it at this time either.
Well, I mean, I don't think I would at this time either. I would agree with that, 100%.
Me too.
Do we know what other towns' limits are?
I don't. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't. I can send out an email on my listserv and see if I can get that information from other communities, but off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be really interesting information to have if we're an outlier one way or the other. Maybe we're probably in the middle, who knows, but it'd be interesting information. I don't know if you have time to do that.
Well, I can shoot an email out and see if I get any responses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I think at this point, since we did receive it just recently, I'm in agreement. I've only looked it over, just given it a cursory look at this point. But I think the discussion for next Tuesday is more just sort of about if anybody has any discussion on any specific portions of this. I don't think there's anything that needs to be changed, at least in the initial look that I've taken over it, but I haven't done an in-depth read over it yet. So I would just ask that we read it and be prepared to talk about it, or not talk about it for that matter if we are all in agreement that there's nothing that needs to change. Any other discussion on the joint select board meeting?
I'm just gonna make the comment that we don't wanna be maxed out at the 11% or 14% because you can't predict the future. And when we have something like the ice storm of 08 or COVID comes along, you need a cushion in there in your finances.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. All right, the second portion of the meeting, the amendment to the bylaw, or the bylaw proposal that's been drafted and circulated by Peter. From what I understand, he has not received anything other than just a thumbs up in terms of language or anything like that. Just in case, I'm going to read it now anyways, just so we all have a chance to hear it, and then we'll have a discussion on it, and then we actually need to take a vote on it to see if we want to put it forward from the Finance Committee or not. So this is, he has it listed as Section 81-11, amending capital appropriations. Warrant articles and floor motions shall not restrict town meeting voters' ability to propose and approve amendments in totality, description, and/or scope to individual items or projects in capital appropriation articles and motion. Notwithstanding the above, amendments shall not limit the town manager's authority to reapply capital funds among the individual items and projects in the capital plan, nor shall town meeting be authorized to increase the total capital plan appropriation printed in the warrant, or take any action relative thereto.
Yeah, I sent a private note to Peter that I'm good with the language as written. And I still am.
Yep, I did the same.
Yeah.
Same. Jay?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I was just asking if you had any comments or thoughts on the amendment, or the bylaw, I suppose, proposal.
Not really. The way it's written is, it's pretty much what Peter was asking for.
Agreed.
Just more, obviously, legal looking than.
3 sentences, it's good. So what's the motion? The motion is for us to recommend this being added to the warrant article?
It needs to be submitted to, I assume, town manager, correct?
To be placed on the town meeting warrant, yes.
Yeah.
And it has to be done by 5 o'clock on the 20th.
On the 20th, which means it would have to be done today.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd make a motion that we submit the capital plan bylaw amendment as read during the meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote. Mr. Simeoni?
Aye.
Mr. Baelish?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Menard?
Aye?
And an aye from myself. So we are unanimous to recommend the warrant article to special town meeting. Excellent. So now we need to talk about that. So the other portion of Tuesday's meeting is to discuss and start to lay the case for why we would like to have that done. Or why we would like this bylaw added. Peter is putting together a short, he said, synopsis as to his reasonings for putting it in here, so he's planning to at least start the conversation on Tuesday with the select board. I'm not too concerned that we're going to have too much disagreement among us in terms of what we're thinking here with this and why we're looking to have it put in here. But that is the second part of our request from the select board to discuss this as well. And it's from what I understand, they are still unanimously against the idea, but they are at least giving us the floor to speak on it and to start to draw some attention to it if we're able to. And with that, this is a nice and short one. Is there any public comment from the committee?
Yeah, so I'll just make a public comment because I guess there's no committee report. So I did watch a couple meetings this week. So one was last night's
ZBA.
ZBA meeting. Hopefully, it wasn't too long, actually. Everyone probably should watch it because it potentially will bankrupt the town. Also going to probably be some legal fees that we're going to have to bake into our budgets over the next couple of years, because my view is it's heading to court again, and we should plan for that. So I would watch that. The second one is I did watch the school committee meeting. I don't know if it was the last one or the one before, but it was in response, Evan, to the request you had for them to come in early. And I agreed with what they were saying, that in general, I agree that the school board, or any board for that matter, should have the first pass on reviewing and discussing and everything related in their process for when, things get vetted, agreed to by the board before it would come to us. That just seems prudent. It seems like the best use of everyone's time. I think, the goal in having those meetings prior to budget season is only to try to have discussions so that we don't have to have them on already long nights with lots of material and all that sort of thing. So, that's the opportunity that I would present on that. And, the school budget is always a long process. I know we want more details of the budget itself. So, just feedback, I guess, to, I know no one from the school committee is here tonight, or then at least not on Zoom. That would be like the clarification, at least from my perspective, of what our ask was. So I don't know if everyone else agrees with that, but those would be my...
So I spoke with Dr. Burnham via email a little bit about that, a little bit further, and I'm in complete agreement that their budget should be reviewed by the school committee and approved by the school committee long before it comes to us. So the ask there was more just an update on their 5-year staffing program, or their 5-year staffing plan, but that as well also would be preferred, or would preferably go through the school committee first. So that's not happening until the second week in December, I believe. So, and it was exactly as you said, it was an attempt to try to kind of cut that meeting down a little bit. We always end up asking questions that are not relative entirely to the budget. We ask all sorts of other questions relative to the schools and just in general. So it's an attempt to try to kind of cut that meeting down a little bit by having it partially done in the fall. As of now, Dr. Burnham, and I'm waiting to hear if Mr. Cassidy is able to come as well, but they are planning to attend the October, I believe the 27th meeting. Just to have a general discussion on ESSER funding and whatnot. And also probably just to kind of have our general questions for the schools. So I think we can flesh that out a little bit more as well, but yes.
Yeah, and then, you know, just, to me, like their staffing profile does get updated every year. It is funded to some level every budget based on their funds. And I think that that's where there's a lot of variability in the overarching town's budget. So that's the one area where I do think if we could focus on understanding that prior to the actual budget being presented, it just seems that there's time for us to digest it, then look at how that impacts the budget versus that big meeting. So that was my thoughts on, with respect to that meeting.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other public comment from the board or committee? Hearing none. Any public comment from the public? Excellent. So upcoming meetings, again, we have our joint meeting with the select board at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, September 20th. At this point, I don't think there is a need to have a pre-meeting. We've already approved, or we've already voted on the bylaw. And as long as we have a chance to read over Article 3, then I think we should be fine for our meeting at 7 o'clock with them. It's more of a discussion than it is anything else. So I don't think we need to have a meeting beforehand unless anyone else is really striving to have a third meeting that week. Okay. Go ahead.
Do we know that, does the select board have any other, I mean, do they have anything they're specifically trying to accomplish on Tuesday other than what we've talked about? Do we know?
Nothing that I've been told.
Okay.
I've relayed everything that Mr. Jeffries has relayed to me.
Okay.
So I don't believe so. I believe it's just meant to be a discussion in general, to get our opinions and to just kind of have a dialogue about things.
Okay. Thank you.
When is a special town meeting? Do you remember?
November 12th.
12th?
It's a Tuesday, like the second week in November.
November 15th.
And I think there are articles that affect the budget, right?
Oh, no, there should definitely be articles that affect the budget.
So we're gonna have to somewhere and back up when we have the,
Right now I'm looking at, it would have to be potentially, well, it depends. We could do it October 13th, but that's going to be really soon after the warrant article, or the time for the warrant articles closes. Our other option would be October 27th, which I think is going to push us too late up against, or we have to have, how much time do we need? A few weeks after.
we have to have a certain amount of time that it's advertised, but as you recall, we've had kind of emergency
Right.
second and third public hearings
Okay.
up until the end. So we probably can look back through the last year's walk-up when we normally have
Sure.
that.
I think initially the plan would be to have at least the 13th, and if need be, we could do the 27th as well.
Okay.
Town manager actually suggested we do the 13th anyways. Just to have at least for that one. So I think that would, but I'll take a look back at the old agendas and see what we've done as well.
And then, is there anything on the 22nd that you had in mind that we needed to talk about?
We need to discuss ARPA funding. The request from town manager for where to spend ARPA funding has been requested to be sent back in by September 30th.
So wouldn't we want to have that discussion after we've seen everyone's requests?
It was, so what she is looking for is all department heads. She sent out a memorandum to all the department heads to see what they would like to have the money spent on. And then she's looking for our opinion as well for where we think the money should be spent on. And then I believe she's going to compile it and I assume present it. So my suspicion is that it's going to be, this is just kind of the information gathering section. And then we'll have another meeting where we actually discuss.
So
what is
as,
that.
so as an advisory board with little power, it seems that we would be advising on the
The second half.
the second half of it more
Right.
so than the first. So,
Right.
Okay. I don't know, I may not be available on the 22nd, and I'm definitely not available on the 13th.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, my plan for the 22nd was just to have the standard meeting as it is normal. Go through everything, have all the committee reports and everything, go through the ARPA funding. I have a few other things to put on there as well that I've got.
Okay.
Start working on our calendar for pre-budget season meetings with department heads. I have a meeting scheduled. The Board of Assessors is penciled to come on the 13th of October as well, just to give us an overview of how that works. And the new DPW director is also scheduled for October 27th with the school committee.
And what about facilities? Are we gonna ask him?
I haven't reached out to facilities yet, but I will reach out to facilities and see if we can do something with that one as well.
Great.
So yes, at this point, September 20th with the select board at 7, September 22nd here as usual, and then October 13th and 27th here as usual, but likely to be a public hearing. Just to get our chances to go through any of the warrant articles that I'm sure that town manager will have for us by the 13th. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Roll call vote. Mr. Simeoni.
Aye.
Mr. Baelish.
Aye.
Mr. Gray.
Aye.
Mr. Menard.
Aye.
And an aye from myself. It is 7:53 and we are adjourned.